for a discussion of disruption, dystopia, and decisions. Please welcome back to the stage Singularity University's Chair for Entrepreneurship and Open Innovation, Pascal Finette.
Wow, that's all the applause you can muster? Holy shit. Okay, I'm in trouble. It's not going to be fun. All right, so welcome, Edmonton, and welcome Singularity U participants. One thing I just want to point out, because it seems to have caused some confusion, I am not Oren. This is Oren. He just happens to look like me, or vice versa. I am not that guy. For better or worse, you will be the judge at the end of this session. So what I want to do is I want to take you through a little bit of a closing session. And I had the great privilege and honor to be with Singularity for a couple years now, and working through a lot of our executive programs, having seen those and really having formed an opinion or an idea on what I think helps you kind of make sense of this world. Before we get there, I want to ask you a question. And the question is a little bit like this. Anyone feels like this cat at the moment? So you're kind of taking all the information in, all this exponential stuff we talked about, all the formulas, and you're getting ready to jump one more exponential trend, and so feeling a bit like that, right? So I want to take you on a journey and hopefully make a little bit more sense of this world. I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about disruption, which is kind of our topic here. I want to talk about dystopia because I think it's important. I want to talk about the decisions you're taking as an individual. So let's talk about disruption. By now, I'm pretty sure you have seen this curve enough times that you can recite it, but also see it in your nightmares. Hemingway wrote a book called The Sun Also Rises. In this book, he has a quote. The full quote, if you have never seen it, goes like this. "How did you go bankrupt?" Bill asks. "Two ways," Sam responds, "gradually and then suddenly." Now, please don't go bankrupt, but this is the way technology moves. This is the way these curves move. They move gradually and then suddenly. They've got this weird thing where it takes a long time for them to develop. These technologies takes a long time for them to mature, and then it feels like stuff happens overnight. Of course, you heard of Ray Kurzweil, our co-founder. He wrote 25 years ago an essay called The Law of Accelerating Returns. I don't need to recite this for you, but I think there's something in there which a lot of us have not fully understood. And that is this. So in this essay, you find this notion that a lot of systems we're seeing in the world move on an exponential curve. By now, you should be able to literally repeat this in your sleep. But I think the thing which people don't fully grok and people don't fully understand is that technology builds on top of technology. Technology enables technology, and that creates the real exponential. Here's an example. This is population growth over time. And as you see, there's this interesting bending upwards. And that's, of course, the first agricultural revolution, the first time in human history that we as humans had enough time to create enough calories to feed ourselves. So then we create more time, and with an abundance of time, what we do is we create more stuff. So we create the Stirling engine, the steam engine, and that gives us an abundance of muscle power. And then we start inventing more things. We start inventing electricity, and that gives us the ability to distribute power out. Ray Kurzweil has an interesting saying. You heard this on the stage probably a couple times. He says that the change we're seeing in the next 100 years equals the change we've seen in the last 20,000 years. Again, that sounds amazing when you're at a cocktail party and recite this. I still think that most of us don't fully understand it, and it took me years to really get behind this. Here's how this works in the real world. Imagine, and this is a little crazy, imagine we invent a time machine. So we're creating this crazy little device we call a time machine. And with this time machine, we do something bizarre. We don't go into the future, but we bring back an old friend. We bring back Jane Austen, who lived in London in 1700. And Jane Austen, of course, wrote Pride and Prejudice and many other books. Now, imagine we bring Jane to Edmonton today, 250, 300 years later. How do you think she would perceive the world? She would basically, if you put her in the town square here in Edmonton, she would probably kneel over and die of shock because the change she experiences is so dramatic. In 1700, they didn't even have electricity, right? So let's assume for a second that Jane miraculously survives this experience and comes to us and says, can I have your time machine? And I want to do the same thing. I want to surprise one of my friends and do the same thing. So we give her a time machine. She repeats the experiment back in London in 1700, and she brings back an old friend of hers, the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa lived in Italy about like 1500. Now the Mona Lisa comes to London in 1700. And how do you think the Mona Lisa perceives London? She will walk through the streets of London and say, well, the political system has changed, and you've got the Stirling engine, the steam engine, and that's about it, because nothing has changed. For our friend Jane Austen to repeat the same craziness, the same experience, she literally needs to go back 13,000 years and bring back a person who has not seen the agricultural revolution. Now let me make this utterly clear to you. You remember this guy? Of course, I grew up on this guy, Back to the Future. This is Marty McFly. Now imagine how he perceives the world today. This is 1984, I remember this guy. No smartphone. No Instagram, no internet, nothing. None of the creatures' comforts you take for granted today, he has experienced. The only thing which hasn't changed for him, luckily, is his car. So, 1984, 2019, things don't change. But then something changes, because then you put him into this car, and you say, experience this car, and this is his experience.
I'm really mad that the option is insane. Like, it's not like just...
Boy, that's perfect. Isn't that good?
That's a random, like, what's the future?
Because the car is insane, right? Everyone thinks the car is insane, so why not have, you know, like an insane mode, right?
That makes sense.
So you just come to like a complete stop.
All right.
And then before you know it, you jam
Oh, shit, Brooks! What the fuck?
70 miles an hour.
Brooks, oh, shit. First of all, you can't do that to people. Like, you gotta give people fair warning.
Why?
Like, you can't just say,
Yeah, you can.
Brooks,
What?
I think I shitted in your seat.
So make no mistake, right? Like, we're this guy. And this is the future which is happening to us. Now, again, you've seen this curve a gazillion times, and I'm pretty sure someone told you that our thinking in this world is linear. And we have to change the way we see the world, the way we think about the world, right? Because if you plot this against each other, the exponential nature of the world and our linear thinking, you've got three distinct points. Point number one, disappointment. Because you look at technology and at the beginning, it is not good enough, and you're disappointed, rightfully so. Now the challenge with disappointment is that you're dismissing. I used to be at Google, I was wearing Google Glass on the Google campus, and if you've ever seen Google Glass, it's a terrible product. You're rightfully disappointed. But the thing is, it gets better and better and better. And then you've got this moment where Steve Jobs gets on stage 11 years ago, shows you the iPhone, and suddenly you realize the phone isn't a phone anymore. A phone is a computer with glass and no buttons. And then you get into chaos and amazement where you cannot comprehend the change we're seeing in the world. And in a lot of cases, we're at this really interesting, weird intersection point. And I think you have learned this over the last 2 days. I want to talk about the disappointing phase a little bit more, because I think this is the most important phase to understand. Everything else follows from here. And I don't want to talk about crying hipsters. They're pretty fun to talk about. But we're in Edmonton, and I figure, you know, like, you're not into hipsters, so let's not talk about these guys. Let's talk about this. Who here is using Siri, Alexa, Google Now, Cortana? A lot of us, right? You know, so let me start with this. I grew up on Star Trek. This is Star Trek in the making. Like, the fact that I can talk to a computer is miraculous. But the challenge is, most of the time, it is just not good enough, because most of the time, my experience with this is this.
What time is my appointment on Sunday evening?
You have 4 appointments last Tuesday at 12 a.m.
I said, what time is my appointment on Sunday evening?
You have 4 appointments last Tuesday at 12 a.m.
I'm not asking about Tuesday.
I don't know what you mean by, I'm not asking about Tuesday. How about a web search for it?
So this is what we call the Siri fail. I mentioned I worked at Google. I have, I think, 8 of these Google Home devices. And my wife and I love nothing more than walk from room to room and ask these devices questions we know they can't answer, just to see how stupid they are. But here's the interesting thing. You look at these systems, and you realize, as a commercial system, and I'm using Siri as an example, they're all the same, basically. As a commercial system, they're only 8 years old. Now, they're children. They haven't had the time to learn anything. Right? The interesting thing, though, is when you look at these systems and you look at how they're developing, they're currently growing. They're doubling in their capacity, their abilities, roughly every single year. Literally, Moore's Law, but every single year. And then the question for me becomes, and the question you want to ask is, how good will they be when they're young teenagers? How good will they be in another 8 to 10 years? And I invite you to ask this question like your friends, your family, your coworkers, and I guarantee you they all make the same mistake. They all do the same math, which is 8 to 16, the difference is 8. They double, so 8 times 2 equals 16. And of course, you know, you are now exponential thinkers. You know this is not right. You know it's a doubling every time period, so you know it's 128 or 256, depending on where you start. Now the question becomes, what does that mean? Even if I come to you today and say, Siri will be 100 times as good in 10 years. You will like, sure, interesting. What does it mean? So now you need to break it down to first principles. You need to break it down to its core components. And you say, what is Siri? It's only 3 things. It's voice recognition, understanding what you say, cognition, understanding what you mean, which is the really hard part, and then it's a bunch of service it connects to. You multiply this out by 100 or 200, and you'll find in 10 years Siri is better than any human in understanding you. Let me repeat this. Better than any human in understanding you. Because then everything changes. If you happen to run a call center, your call center is gone. I was with Atento, it's the largest call center operator in Peru. It's the 2nd largest employer in the country of Peru. And I was with their CEO, super smart guy. I'm in the core main call center, 12,000 people around us. It's literally a campus, a university-style campus. And he looks around himself and he says, none of these people will do customer support anymore. I want them to do it, make no mistake, he wants them to still be there. He wants them to do concierge services and really work with the customer, but not first and second line customer support. I was with a German car manufacturer and they shall go unnamed to protect their innocence, and it is not the one on this picture. And I was with the CEO of their manufacturing unit. And this is 2017. And I asked them, they come and show me the dashboard, the car dashboard of the future. And it looked like a lot like this. You know, it was beautiful, had like Kevlar and wood and buttons and screens and joysticks, all this kind of stuff. And I asked them a simple question, say like, okay, so this is great. How long will this, like when does it come? And he said like 2018. If you buy the car now, you get it. And I was like, that's great. How long will it stay in production? And he looks at me and he's like so happy. He says, 8 years. And I'm like, but it's gone. Because in the future, you will get in the car, there's no buttons anymore because you don't need them, because you will say, car, play the radio, and the car will say, Pascal, I know you love the 80s. Let me cue up some Madonna for you. But let me tell you the worst. Today, I can come to my wife and say, honey, on the way home, I forgot to bring the milk. Tomorrow, Siri will say, Pascal, I told you 3 times on the way home to pick up the milk, you liar. Right, so even that is gone. Now, let me tell you a story, and if you're in retail, this should terrify you. If you're not in retail, take it as an analogy, because we see it everywhere. So you take a device like this. This is Amazon Echo. The cheapest version costs $29 US. 20% of all searches on a mobile device in the United States in 2016 were done using voice. That's pretty incredible, because I'm pretty sure you don't do this. I'm pretty sure you still type searches, but your kids, they use their voice. In 2020, this is Comcast data, they say that 50% of all searches will be voice. And voice is interesting for a simple reason. You remember these guys, right? Energizer is the world's biggest brand in batteries. Do you truly believe that if you go to an Alexa device or a Siri device, whatever device, do you truly believe you will go to this device and say, hey Alexa, order a pack of Energizer Max Power Seal AAA alkaline batteries? No, of course not. What you say to Alexa is, Alexa, order batteries. And if you do this on the internet today, that's fine. Because you go on Amazon, you type in batteries, and the world is fine, because Amazon shows you the most popular battery brands ranked. But if you do this,
Alexa, order batteries.
What kind of batteries does Alexa ship you? Well, I can tell you which batteries they ship. They ship you these. Now, here's where it gets interesting. 97% of all batteries sold online in the United States of America are sold through Amazon. 97%. If this is 20% of those are already Amazon branded batteries. This is the face you're making if you're Energizer. Now, you can say, okay, whatever, it's Energizer, who gives a damn, right? Like if you're smart, you shorten their stock, whatever. But here gets where it gets interesting. Yeah, all the financial advisors are like, hey, wait a second, let me just write this down. here gets interesting, right? So I get interested in this, and I'm like, okay, it's batteries. And then you look at category after category, and you realize that Amazon has way more than 80% market share in category after category. Skincare, for Christ's sake, golf equipment, home improvement, it's all Amazon. Amazon owns online shopping. And then, you know, like I look at this and I'm like, okay, surely there must be categories in this world which are safe. So I look at this. This is diapers, and there's a diaper brand called Pampers. And you know, if you've got a baby, like Oren can attest to this, you care what you put on the naked bottom of your baby. You care about this stuff. Well, turns out 50% of all diapers Amazon sells, and they sell a ton of diapers, are Amazon-branded diapers. And then I was with a large oil company at their main headquarters in the United States, not here, and I'm doing this talk. And there's like a huge audience, and there's all like the leaders in the company. And afterwards, a person comes to me, you know, after the talk, and comes to me and says, hey, Pascal, I just want to introduce myself. I'm the leader of our lubricant business. I'm like, that's great. He's like, yes, it's 20% of our total revenue. I'm like, that's amazing. And he says, yes. And yesterday, Amazon started selling engine oil. Right? And think about what this means, not just for selling your stuff, but what this means for like the advertising industry. Like advertising just disappears. This doesn't make like any difference anymore. Amazon Alexa does not care about bunnies anymore. But here's the interesting thing for you. Now you can look at this and you can say, I don't care, I'm not in retail, Amazon is whatever it is. And Amazon is an example, right? It's not just the Amazons. But here's the thing I want you to learn. The thing is, there is an Amazon in your industry, or there will be an Amazon in your industry. And then it becomes really, really disruptive. But the good news is, and the bad news is, that our experience with the world is like this.
Cuckoo! What is raining today? Water.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it answered. It said yeah.
You say yeah?
Yeah, it's her.
Oh my God. Is a woman?
Yeah.
I'm glad to meet you.
What is this thing?
Hello, Cuckoo.
Hey, you're okay.
That's something from the
Google.
Alphabets.
You have to say, hey, Google, or okay.
Hey, Google. Okay, Google.
What's the weather?
Yeah.
What's the weather, ask?
What the weather? You want to know what is the weather?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
In Flagler Beach tomorrow, there will be showers with a high of 65 and a low of 56.
With this. It's a mystery.
Watch it there.
I'm scared. I'm scared. It's a mystery. Oh my gosh. No.
So again, this is us, right? This is us and the future coming in contact with us. So with that being said, I want to talk about disruption. And I find this interesting. I keep saying this about disruption. So disruption is this really interesting word which makes no sense to me anymore because, so I'm mostly a vegetarian, my wife is a vegetarian, and if you've ever eaten tofu, disruption has become tofu because tofu tastes like nothing. And then you put sauce on it and it tastes like whatever sauce is on tofu. And disruption has become the same thing. We use this word and it's like nobody can define it, everybody throws it around. If you're a consultant, you love to use it because it puts the fear of God into your clients' heads and you can sell them a lot of stuff. Now that's not, you know, it's probably not what we want to do. So here's the thing. So we got interested in this and the first thing is we wanted to differentiate between innovation and disruption. And this is like really old research being done by, originally by McKinsey Group. And they said there's a difference between innovation and disruption. Innovation is when you do the same things just better, right? So you make your Procter & Gamble, you make Tide washing powder, and your next version of Tide is Tide Plus and Ultra Plus and so on and so on. And that's fine because your customer demands it. Your customer comes and says, what is new this year? Now, every once in a while, you do something new. You create a new product. So you're making, instead of Tide powder, you make Tide liquid. But it's not really disruptive. It becomes disruptive when you create something new which makes the old thing obsolete. Now, we scoured the planet, in fact, to find a unified theory of disruption, and we couldn't find one. I don't think there is one. Or probably we're not smart enough to find it. But what we did find is we found 3 core forces which we believe lead to disruption, and I want to share those with you. And the way I'm doing this is I'm going to show you the forces very quickly, and then I'll give you a very tangible example. Here's the idea. Disruption is not a singular feature. Your existing skills and processes are no longer relevant, and lastly, disruption happens at the go-to market. Let's talk about these guys. And I want to talk about these guys not because, everybody talks about Nokia, but because everybody talks about Nokia, because I think we're getting this wrong. It is so easy, like if you ever heard the word disruption, I guarantee you there's 3 companies which are always mentioned. Nokia, Blockbuster, and Kodak. And I find this a little offending to go to a company like Nokia, which had 50,000 really incredibly smart people, and say you were all idiots. So we got interested in this, and I said, like, what happened at Nokia? What is the real story of Nokia? And I had the great fortune at Singularity University, we had a lot of ex-Nokia people come through the program. And every time I found one, I said, I want to take you out for dinner. I need to know what happened. And here's the story. Nokia does what is called innovation. They create this thing on your left, and then they make it a little bit better, right? So it gets a bit smaller, and the battery life gets better, and so on and so on. And at the height of this, in March 2007, they released this product. This is a Nokia N95, cost $400, unsubsidized. Beautiful device. It had 2 cameras. You could take a selfie with it. Was the size of a postage stamp, roughly. It had a little bit of the internet on it. I bought one of those. I was so proud of it. And oh, by the way, 2 weeks of battery life. Hello, iPhone, 2 weeks. Great product. But then in June, this comes out. And I go to the Nokia guys and I'm like, wait a second. How can this happen when you just did this? Like, how do you get from there to there? There is no progression. And they said to me, Pascal, you get this wrong. Because you are talking about Nokia getting disrupted by the smartphone. You're talking about Nokia getting disrupted by the iPhone, when in reality, the iPhone is not a singular thing. The iPhone is this. The iPhone is a different type of screen, a different type of processor, a whole bunch of different types of battery parts and sensors, a different type of operating system. And the interesting thing became, I talked to the guy who was responsible for displays at Nokia, and I said, didn't you see this happening? And he said, Pascal, I had the same prototype in my lab as Apple had. Of course we knew it was happening. And then I talked to the guy who was responsible for the operating system, Symbian, and I said, didn't you see that these operating systems are changing? And he said, of course, Pascal, we knew this. But what they couldn't do is, they couldn't put it together. And that's a very different skill. Because disruption is not a singular feature. It's not this single thing. It's not the smartphone which surprises you. It's the way you package this stuff and bring it together in a unique new way. That's number 1. The second one is this. This is going to be an interview, I'll show you this in a second, with Steve Ballmer, who at the time was the CEO of Microsoft. And if you remember, Microsoft had a mobile phone operating system, so they had a bone in this fight. This interview was done about a week or 2 after Apple introduced the iPhone. And this is Steve's response.
Steve, let me ask you about the iPhone and the Zune, if I may. The Zune was getting some traction, and Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw that?
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine.
So everybody who's like smiling a little bit or like chuckling, that was my response. I watched this video, I'm like, oh my God, Steve is such a douchebag. He's so stupid. Like, how can he not see this, right? Of course, you see this. And you're like, and then, I paused and it was like, wait a second. This guy was the CEO of the largest software company in the world. He clearly is smart. So I watched this video on loop 20 times. No joke. I watched it over and over and again. I was like, what does he see that I don't see? And then I watched the video, and by the 20th time, I'm like, holy shit, he's right. He is 100% totally right. Because the mistake he's making is he's comparing the iPhone to a phone, when the iPhone is a computer. The iPhone is a computer in a different form factor. And that leads to a really interesting outcome, because all the existing skills and processes everybody in the phone industry had were to create a phone. The iPhone is different. Because here, you don't care about the voice quality. Remember, the first iPhone had terrible voice quality. You don't care about the fact that it doesn't have 2 weeks battery life, because it's a computer. It gives you all this other stuff. But you happen to have 50,000 people who are really good at making phones. And your existing skills and processes are no longer relevant. This singular feature here, this single thing here, is the thing which freaks me out most about our world economy. Because I give you an example. I'm German, I mentioned this. You go to a company like Volkswagen, it's the largest employer in Germany, 350,000 people employed in Germany. They're making a product which looks like this. This is a combustion engine, 2,500 moving parts. It's incredibly complex to produce. The fact that these cars don't fall apart every time you get in there is a miracle. But here's the interesting thing. So you have 350,000 people where the existing skills and processes are to make this. And then you take this. This is the engine from a Tesla. It has 60 parts. Every child can produce this. Every child can make this. Not quite. But you get the idea. You've got 350,000 people where the existing skills and processes are absolutely no longer relevant. This is what you need to prepare for. And then here's the last point. If you've ever seen a keynote from Apple, like the way they introduce a product is the Oscars, right? It's not just like, here's a new product. It is this, right? You get on stage, Steve Jobs.
Thank you for coming. We're going to make some history together today.
So compare this with how you bought the phone at the same time. At least in Europe, where I was at the same time, you walked into this store, this phone store, which was next to eye candy. I have no idea what they're selling. Doesn't matter. You go into the store, the mobile solutions store, and there's like a 21-year-old who hasn't showered for a week. And they push this phone on you because they get a subsidy from the manufacturer. They don't care which phone you buy. They just like, get out of the store and give me my money. Now you compare this with the way Apple sold their products, right? It's the temple. It's glass, steel, wood. You go to the genius. I fundamentally believe that if Apple would have chosen to sell the product through the same channel as every other phone, they would have not been successful. But the go-to-market changed. You have to figure out what is the go-to-market for your product. The reason why Tesla doesn't sell their products in a store is similar. And then you add to all of this a CEO, Stephen Elop at the time, who effectively is a number cruncher. And he said after the fact, years after the fact, he got interviewed and they were like, hey, Stephen, what did happen to Nokia? And he said, oh, we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. Make a mental note for every one of you who ever aspires to be a CEO. If your company goes under, which happens, never say this stuff. Like blame someone else. Say like, oh, Steve was mean and got us out of the cell, whatever. But never ever say this. This is stupid. But contrast this with this. This is Scott Cook, who's the CEO, founder CEO of Intuit. It's an accounting company in Silicon Valley. I believe Scott is the best CEO we have in Silicon Valley. And he said success is a powerful thing because it makes companies stupid. And they become less and less innovative. I think that's the biggest danger we have in a company. So here's your three things. Disruption is not a singular feature. Existing skills and processes are no longer relevant, and disruption almost happens at the go-to-market. Now, the good news about all of this is, and by the way, the good news about everything I tell you is, nothing is complicated. It's really not that complicated. It's largely common sense, which doesn't make it common practice because it's really hard. And there's a lot of complexity in it. For those of you who went to business school, probably like me 20 years ago, you do remember, hopefully, the 4 Ps. And the 4 Ps is not Pascal, 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 Pascal. Sadly, the 4 Ps is product, price, promotion, and place. We know this for the last 40 years. This is where disruption happens. But you go to a product manager in Silicon Valley at any of the big companies, they have never heard of the 4 Ps. It's all common sense. And then for all of you who are in an existing company, a legacy company, an incumbent company, you have to be careful and not be taken over by the 4 horsemen. The 4 horsemen is this: the fear of cannibalization, the leverage what you have, the immune system response, and the time horizon fallacy. Let me explain. The fear of cannibalization. This is the classic example where you have companies who say, oh, we can't do this because we're making so much money with this other stuff. This is what killed Kodak. Because Kodak sits there and says like, oh, we make so much money making film and processing film, and this other thing, this digital thing doesn't make that much money, so we cannibalize ourselves, so we're not doing it. The leverage what you have is, we know something and we know how to do it really well, so we need to keep doing it. particularly if you have invested OpEx and CapEx into those areas. Very dangerous. And I want to explain a little bit more what the immune system response is. Every company in their beginning is in an exploration and innovation phase. Every company. Even if your company is 200 years old, in the beginning you were in exploration and innovation. At one point in your career, in your life, you get to what is called product market fit. That's what the fabled land of every startup is. When you get to the point where the customer wants the thing you want, you create. And then you turn into the protecting the status quo mode. And that's good, because that's how you make money. You want to milk the cow. That's fine. But here's the thing, what happens is, when you start doing this, you calcify this product. Because what you're now doing is you're hiring people who are really good at protecting the status quo. And when you have too many of those people in your organization, what they do is they create an immune system. Like every new idea becomes a threat to them, so they destroy it. And that's a fallacy. It's a fallacy for existing companies. And here's the last one. This is related. It's called the time horizon fallacy. You might have heard of the 3 time horizon. Time horizon 1 is the here and now, the thing you do and you do now. And every company is good at the here and now, otherwise you would not exist. And then there's time horizon 3 all out there, which is research and development. Some companies are good at this. And the time horizon 2 is the in-between state. This is when you do something which you kind of like, you take it out of R&D and you bring it into the today. Well, here's the challenge you have. And I've seen this over and over and over again. You go and use the time horizon 2, and 2 things happen in time horizon 2. The first is, the time horizon 1 people will come and apply the same logic and the same metrics of time horizon 1 to time horizon 2. They will say, great, when does it make $100 million? And the time horizon 2 people would say, I don't know. It's a new market, we don't know. And then you kill the project because it doesn't make any money. Or, if you even embark on this journey, what happens is when something falls, time horizon 1 falls on hard times, they start to plunder the resources from time horizon 2. They say, hey, you've got these 100 engineers, they're not like generating any revenue, give them to me because I need them now. And then you starve yourself to death. Now here's the interesting thing. For all of you who are in a startup, the good news about you is you have no legacy. And if you don't have any legacy, you don't have any problems. So that's the good news for a startup. So those are your 4 horsemen. Be careful. And as Andy Grove from Intel once famously said, only the paranoid survive. I think you need to have a healthy version of paranoia. Now, all that being said, I want to talk a little bit about, you've talked a lot about technology, and we've talked about a few of those topics in technology which actually become probably dystopian. And I want to talk about this a little bit more, probably because I'm German. Someone laughed about that. So here's the challenge, right? So you look at social. And you heard my friend Ann Conley talk about this. Like, social media led to the uprising in the Middle East. And granted, that didn't turn out all that well, but the initial idea was really good. But at the same time, there's a dark side to it. And you might have heard about the Chinese credit scoring system, where the Chinese are assigning a social credit score to every single person. And what they're doing is they're looking at your behaviors. They look at, did you cross a red light? Are you buying Chinese products? Do you pay back your credits? How do you behave? And then they give you a score. And their whole idea is to create scores for every single person. Now, the interesting thing about this is you go onto the website of the ministry, which is basically doing this, and you can read what their plan about this is. And it's terrifying. Their plan is effectively, they create this blacklist system. Then they say, what we want to do is we want to actually control your movement. We will not allow you to move by removing access to transportation, which means that everywhere is limited for you. You live in a prison without being in the prison. And just to show you how crazy this is, in the first 8 months of last year, they denied 11 million people plane tickets based on their social scores. So you go on a website, you want to buy a plane ticket to see your family, and the thing says you can't buy a plane ticket. Good luck. There's a company called Ant Financial. It's one of the largest financial institutions in the world now. They launched a new healthcare, a crowdsourced healthcare product, which is incredible. The challenge, though, is if you don't have a social score of at least 600, you can't get healthcare. The Chinese imprison a whole class of people simply because based on their behavior without putting them into prison. That's crazy. And don't just think it's the Chinese, right? So let's look at AI, artificial intelligence. You use IBM Watson to detect cancers on CT scans better than any human. You use AlphaGo to play the game of Go better than any human, and you defeat the world champion 4 out of 5 games. You feed art into an AI, and in the case of Deep Dream, another Google project, it creates new art. Now, granted, I also believe this AI smoked a little bit too much weed. But just think about this. This is pretty crazy. Like, we thought that creativity is a human endeavor. It probably isn't. And here's where this goes like really weird. Anyone have heard of Microsoft Tay? So Tay was a chatbot. And the idea for Tay was very simple. It lived on Twitter. And it's a research project. It's an AI from Microsoft. And the idea is the following. I tweet at Tay, and Tay responds in the sweet, soft style of a 19-year-old girl. And then we keep talking, and it learns from our interaction and becomes better and sweeter and nicer. And Microsoft said, like, like when they launched this product, said, like, the more you chat with Tay, the smarter she gets. That's the premise of AI. It learns. Now, here's what happens. So she starts out with, like, her first tweet is like, hello, world. And then she says, like, like, I need to sleep now. I'm too tired. And then, a few hours later, she just wakes up. Someone tweets at her, and she says, can I just say that I'm so stoked to meet you? Yeah, humans are super cool. Now, remember, Tay lives on the internet. And the internet is full of really, really weird people. People who ask questions like, how much Listerine do I need to drink to become drunk? It's an actual question, and actually someone did the math behind this. The internet is full of people who believe that the world is actually flat. The internet believes that Hitler is still alive. Of course Hitler is still alive. So what could possibly go wrong? Right? Possibly. Well, I can tell you what possibly goes wrong. So people start tweeting really nasty stuff at Tay, and because Tay learns, Tay becomes nasty. So Tay says something like, I hate feminists and I'll die and burn in hell. Not particularly nice. And, because everything on the internet has something to do with Hitler, somehow Hitler was right and I hate the Jews. Right? And then someone barks at her and says, like, you can't do this. And she's like, whoa, chill, I'm a nice person, I just hate everybody. Less than 24 hours after Tay goes live, Microsoft switches off Tay because she's becoming a nasty thing. And they're going out there and they're saying, like, oh, we're just making some adjustments to Tay. Now, you can look at this and say, yeah, whatever, it's fun, the internet is a weird cesspool. But here's the interesting thing about AIs. All these deep learning algorithms are black boxes. We don't know why they make decisions. That's the reason why I've got these weird biases in them, and it's so hard for us to understand this. And now the question I'm asking you is, where do you want to take this? So we have something like insurance. An AI determines your insurance rate. Do you want that? I'm not sure. Amazon has famously scraped an AI recruiting tool. What they've done is they took all these successful CVs and fed them into an AI. It's actually a pretty good idea. And say, now every CV which comes in, we have scored by this AI, right? Because we know what a good Amazonian looks like. 3 months later, someone in HR wakes up and says, wait a second, we don't get any applications from women anymore, like 0. So they look at the AI and they're like, holy crap, the AI amplified the bias because 95% of the workforce is male, so the AI says, if you're female, you can't be good. Like, you couldn't get a job at Amazon for 3 months based on an AI, just purely based on your gender. In the US, this is true. Like, in the US, we're now using AIs to help judges to determine how long you should go to jail. I'm not sure if that's all that great. We're using AIs now, this is experimental, to avoid friendly fire. Again, in theory, a good idea. So friendly fire is like, if I'm a Canadian and there's another Canadian running around on the battlefield, I shouldn't shoot them. So determining that is not that easy. So the AI, we now ask AIs to basically make a kill or no kill decision. And we ask AIs to determine if a loved one should be switched off on a life support machine, yes or no, based on the potential outcome if that person becomes a vegetable or survives. That's weird. We shouldn't do this. Let's talk about genetics. Again, I'm a techno-optimist, right? We use genetics. This is a company we invested into, Miraculous. What they're doing is, they have this little machine. They're taking a blood test, and they find in your blood something called RNA. RNA translates DNA into proteins. What they found is that certain types of cancer shed RNA into your bloodstream. And through some very clever synthetic biology tricks, they built a little trap. So you take a full blood test, you run it through this machine. If you happen to have this RNA present in your bloodstream, the traps effectively close and they illuminate in this blue color. The test costs $200, takes 20 minutes to administer, and finds, for example, stomach cancer pre-stage 1, earlier than any other test on the planet. Your chance of curing cancer is 99.8% at that stage. You survive. That's incredible. But then again, everything has a dark side. This is a good friend of mine. This is Heather Dewey-Harcourt, and she has an art project where she concerns herself with the question of DNA, and I'll let Heather talk about this herself.
We don't know yet how our DNA might be used against us in the future.
New York artist Heather Dewey-Harcourt.
One artist in New York is making 3D models of people's faces, people that she's never met.
She calls the project Stranger Visions. The strangers are people whose genetic material she finds on the sidewalks and subways of New York City.
How much can I actually find out about you from something that you accidentally leave behind?
Let me unpack this. This is a bit strange, to say the least. What Heather is doing is she's taking cigarette butts on the streets of New York. Remember, she's an artist. She's not like a Nobel Prize winning geneticist, right? So she takes cigarette butts on the streets of New York. On the cigarette butt is your saliva. In your saliva is your DNA, of course. She then extracts the DNA using a technique the FBI has mastered 30 years ago. If you're watching CSI on television, it's what they do all day long. Then she sends this off to an advanced genetics testing lab. That testing lab runs a whole bunch of tests on it and tells Heather what your biometrics are, the shape of your skull, color of your hair, color of your skin. And you can even determine roughly how old you are based on the degradation of the DNA. She takes all this data, puts it into a 3D model, and creates those 3D masks of people she has never seen before. Now here's the interesting thing about this, and the reason why I show this all around the world, in particular I show this to politicians. There is, to the very best of my knowledge, not a single jurisdiction in the world where this is currently illegal. It is perfectly legal for me to pick up the trash out there if you use the paper cup, take the DNA from your paper cup, sequence this DNA from your paper cup, and by the way, look at, for example, which genetic diseases you happen to have. Or if I'm nefarious, I send it off to China and let you have them create a clone of you. It's a weird world. And we're not talking about this. I show this to politicians, they've never seen this stuff before. And then it goes to humans, right? Like this is the last level of this. If you have a college kid, if you have a kid which is in college in the United States of America, I would argue, you heard this notion that we're bifurcating as a species. So a couple of my colleagues talk about this. It's the notion of like, there's Homo sapiens and there's something elevated from Homo sapiens. And I argue that this is happening already, because if you go to college in the United States, it is very likely that your kids are taking a drug called Adderall. Adderall is a ADHD drug which basically gets you to focus. If you take this as a healthy person, it gives you superpowers because it allows you to focus. You talk to college kids in the US, I talk to a lot of college kids in the US, they feel pressure to take this because they are at a disadvantage if they don't take Adderall in comparison to other kids in the school. So we become this weird thing where we become more than human, probably not in the best way. Like we're moving into a world where we probably become Elysium-like, man-machines fused. But the challenge with that is, and this is the runaway effect, is when you really bifurcate as a species, and this is the fear, and if you read Yuval Harari, this is his fear, he expresses that you get to this world where the people who are enhanced can enhance themselves faster than the people who are not enhanced keep up. And then you get wider and wider and wider. But make absolutely no mistake, you saw Tilly today, we have examples of the fusion of man-machine, which is the most beautiful expression of what this looks like. And I want to show you one more example. This young woman is she's deaf since birth, and she gets a cochlear implant, which is an implant which basically has a couple of wires, gets into your brain, and allows you to hear for the first time, and this is her experience.
It's like so close. There you go. We're not right over it. There you go. It's beeping. So now technically your device is on. Can you tell? Oh, that's exciting. Here, you can put it down for a second. Just get used to the sound. What does it sound like? Do you want to grab some tissue? I don't want to hear myself cry. Can you hear me? And you hear your voice? Does your voice sound pretty loud?
No, not really.
Well, that's good.
My laughter sounds loud.
Yeah, you'll get used to all of that over time.
Isn't that absolutely incredible? Now, this begets an interesting question for me. And I don't mean this in any way, shape, or form as a spiritual question or religious question, but I do believe that we become gods. We get powers which were never in our ability before. We are getting the power to change life in really, really interesting ways. And the question for me becomes, if we become gods, we better get good at it. Noam Chomsky once said, like, unless you believe that the future can be better, you're unlikely to step up and take responsibility for making it so. And then I'm asking myself, of my fellow Silicon Valley folks, for example, I'm asking myself, are we getting good at becoming gods? And I got really encouraged because there's a site which launched a little while ago. It's called the Problem of the Day site. And people go there and say, here's a problem, and there's a problem we need to fix. So I go to the site, I'm really excited, and I'm looking at these problems, and the first problem I see is this. Someone should develop an app which for supermarkets that allow you to find items. Whoever does it will make millions. I'm like, really? That is a problem we need to fix? And then I'm going further, and there's another problem, which is someone should invent an app called something like Hoop Now, where you can meet up with random people who just want to play basketball. So these are the problems we're trying to fix. And then the last one I find is this one. Someone should invent an app for when you're trying to clap at a band at a gig, but holding a pint. So clearly, we're not solving the right problems here. And make no mistake, when Peter Diamandis tells you this, and this is data. When you look at all the data in the world, at and by and at large, the world is getting better, despite the fact that we feel it's not getting better. Literacy rates go up, longevity goes up by and at large, democracy overall goes up, vaccination rates go up, etc., etc., etc. But the important thing for me is behind all these statistics, there are actual people. And allow me to share 3 personal stories, and I want to be just pre-vulnerable with you. I wanted to share 3 important stories to me. And I want to start out with this one. There's a gentleman here in this audience today who I have the rare opportunity to actually see in person. But it's Mark Moore. Mark, can you quickly stand up? Where are you? Over there. So you might have met Mark. And the story for me and Mark is this. I used to mentor, I still mentor at a really incredible institution which works with social good entrepreneurs. And I meet Mark and his partner at this institution. I'm sitting down with Mark and I say, Mark, by the way, Mark, this is a terrible picture. So just so shame. But I sit down with Mark and I say, Mark, what is it you do in the world? Why do I care? Why do I need to care about the stuff you're doing? And he says, what I'm doing is this. My company tackles probably one of the most heartbreaking problems in the world, which is malnutrition. There's a child which dies on this planet every 8 seconds of malnutrition. And by the way, make no mistake, we've got enough calories on this planet to feed everyone. It's just in the wrong place. It's a hard problem to solve. And I get really interested. It's like, Mark, this is incredible. Really, this is happening? 2 million children every year waste because of malnutrition. So I get interested and I look this up and in the same 8 seconds, McDonald's sells 600 hamburgers. And I say, Mark, what do you do about this? And Mark says, we do this. We've got this really interesting product. Anyone here likes peanut butter? Peanut butter? Come on, you like peanut butter, right? Yes. Let me do this. Peanut butter. Who likes peanut butter? First row. There you go. Let me see how far I can throw these things. So this is peanut butter. You open any one of these packages. I highly encourage it. By the way, you will all get a package when you go out, so please take one of these. Last one here over there. What this is it's called RUTF, is a ready-made therapeutic food. 30 plus years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, the Doctors Without Borders find a solution to the problem you just saw. It's peanut butter, simple peanut butter fortified with a bunch of vitamins and minerals. You give this to a child, you give a child 3 of those doses every single day. It's about 1,500 calories in total. 95% of all these children survive. Yes, indeed. And this guy, so here's what he does. He single-handedly brought down the price of making these products by 60%. Now I get to him and I say, Mark, I'm sitting down with him and I say, Mark, what is your biggest problem? He said, well, we can't, like, he's making millions of these packages. I'm like, why is this freaking problem still existing? And he says, well, it's not that easy as you think. And I ask him a simple question. I say, okay, Mark, 2 million children, it's like 3 packets. How much money do we need to spend as a global community to make this problem go away, disappear? And Mark says to me, I've done this math over and over again. I've validated it with the United Nations, anyone. And the number is $1 billion US. It takes the global community $1 billion US to make this problem just disappear from this planet. And then I get really angry about this because then I ask myself, what can you buy for $1 billion US? And nothing against soccer, I'm coming from the country of soccer, but the annual budget of AC Milan is $1 billion US. And I'm asking myself, who are we as people? Who are we if we decide to spend $1 billion on soccer and let 2 million children die of starvation? And what Mark taught me more than anyone else is that there are no statistics, there are no side effects, there are no intended consequences, there are only our choices. Which brings me to my second friend I want to introduce you to. This is Nithya Ramamata. She runs a company called Nextleaf Analytics. And Nextleaf chooses to tackle a really hard problem, which is this. About 25% of vaccines in the developing countries spoil because of a break in the cold chain. They get too warm or too cold. And Nithya says we need to change this. This affects tens of millions of children worldwide. And I see her and I meet her a couple years ago. This is about 10 years ago when I was at, 8 years ago when I was at Google. And she shows me her solution. She shows me this thing. And you open it up and what you'll see in this thing is, you see as Chinese, $25 Chinese-made Android smartphone, you see a little like temperature sensor. There's about 25 cents of her own hardware which she has developed. And you put this all into this little box, you bolt it onto a fridge, and now something magical happens. It continuously measures the temperature, and because this is a smartphone, it's smart, right? It sends the data up into the cloud, so you see, first of all, you can send the nurse in the field a text message which tells the nurse if the cold chain was violated or not. So if the vaccine in that vaccine fridge is still good or not. Secondly, it sends the data into the cloud, you see where these breaks happen, and you can do something about this. And the first time I see Nithya, I ask her, so I was at google.org where we gave grants to these organizations, and I asked her a simple question. I say like, Nithya, so this is great, so where are you with this? And she says, well, we have completed a study, it works, we know it works, and we have a grant from the Gates Foundation. And if you know anything about the world of aid, the Gates Foundation is kind of like the peak. Like this is the golden child. And I asked her, it's like, that's incredible. How much did you get from the Gates Foundation? And she said, the Gates Foundation gave us a blank check. And I was like, what? And she's like, no, really. They basically said, how much do you need? And I was like, Nithya, that's great. What did you tell them? And she said, well, we asked them for $460,000. And I'm like, Nithya, why do you ask them for $460,000? And he's like, well, we want to run this in another country. We want to test it. We want to try it out. And I look at her and I'm like, Nithya, in your hands you hold everything to make the problem go away. Please think about this. And to her credit, she calls me the day after and she says, you know what, Pascal, we wrote $2 million on that check. And by the way, I want $2 million from you at Google to match this. And we're like, of course we give you the money, of course. Today, Nithya, with her team, and this is a team of 50 people, it's tiny. They have saved the lives of 12 million children. They have brought their device to 6 African countries, yes. 6 African countries as well as India. In all of those countries, the problem has disappeared. And the simple reason why I show you this is for 2 reasons. The one is I want you to understand, the thing you saw there, this device, you can do this. Everybody can do this. It is not rocket science. And the second one is this. I believe we live in a world, I fundamentally believe we live in a world where we can ask and answer this question. When you look at a problem, you can ask the question, what does it take to make the problem go away? You heard Steve Jobs probably famously say, make a dent in the universe. And pardon my French here, but I don't give a shit about making dents in the universe anymore because we have the tools and the power to make problems disappear. And I want to share a last story, and this is a very personal story. I want to share a last story with you. This here is a friend of mine, Daniel Epstein. He's probably one of the best entrepreneurs in the world. He was just voted one of the the 50 top world's leaders by Forbes magazine. And Daniel runs an institution, a company, an organization called Unreasonable. And what Unreasonable does is, they're probably the best, I think they're the best social good accelerator in the world. Their motto is, you saw this slide today, they've got this, their name comes from the unreasonable man, the quote from George Bernard Shaw, the unreasonable man adapts himself to the world. And what they're doing is they run these programs. So I'm a mentor there. I see a lot of their companies. Mark was part of their program. I see a lot of these companies and I sit down with them and I mentor them. And here's what happened to me. So I sit down with these companies and they tell me about the incredible work they're doing. So anything from Mark's work or Nithya's work or clean drinking water in Africa. And I sit there and I mentor them and I see their passion. And I personally sit down and I sit down with this woman, Anya. This was the last woman I mentored in this particular cohort. And I ask her what she's doing, and I realize I don't care. I realize deep down in my heart, in my gut, I just don't care. I see their passion for this project, and of course intellectually I care about all these causes, but I can't find the fire in me. And I get truly depressed. Like I walk back this evening, I cry because I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, who am I? Like, what kind of monster am I that I can't feel the passion, that I can't attach myself to any of those causes? And this is true. Like, I literally fall into this deep hole for 8 weeks. I think I need to go to Wall Street and become a Wall Street banker. Like, no joke. I'm like, what kind of person am I? And then it dawns on me, because then you start digging really deep and you understand that you need to find something you connect to. And then I realized that I don't care about those courses, but I do realize that I care about the people solving the problem. I care deeply about Anya. I care deeply about Mark. I don't care necessarily about their cause. So I basically changed my life. I'm devoting my life to solving and helping these people. And the question I want you to figure out for yourself is, what truly matters? What truly matters to you? Not what you think you should care about, but what matters to you on a personal level. Oren started with a quote from a dear friend and colleague of ours, and I love the quote, which is, what is the potential of a child? The potential of a child is unlimited. It's absolutely unlimited. But if a child has an unlimited potential, what is your potential? It surely is bigger than a child, because you've learned so much more, you've got so much more access to resources, you've got a community, right? I want to show you a short clip from Steve Jobs. I'm not a big Steve Jobs fan. I think he's actually a very troubled creature. But he said something in the in-between years from Apple when he was at a company called Next, which was like his in-between company. He said something which I find profound, and I want to have you hear it.
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. But life, that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. And the minute that you understand that you can poke life and actually something will, if you push in, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it, that's maybe the most important thing.
So let me show you someone who poked life. This is Rosa Parks. Of course, you know that the reason why we have civil rights in the United States for everyone is basically just her work. And I have the great pleasure and fortune and probably weird pleasure to work with the US Navy SEALs a tiny little bit. And if you know the Navy SEALs, it's a special forces unit in the United States. And they have a handbook. And this handbook is the handbook they give to what they call baby SEALs, young Navy SEALs. And in this handbook, on one of the first pages, you'll find a formula. And I think the formula is so important because that formula is your rate of growth. And what they mean by that is your personal growth, you as an individual. Your rate of growth equals the magnitude of the challenge multiplied by the intensity of the attack. If you hold this true, I fundamentally believe this to be true, then why wouldn't you pick the hardest challenge you can possibly find and attack it as hard as you possibly can, because that's growth. And seriously, what is life more than just growing? I mean, that's what life is about. I mentioned earlier, I've got the great fortune to moderate our executive program every once in a while. It's a week-long program. And about 2-3 years ago, I realized I've got this incredible gift to be, in our case, about with 80 people, and I've been here with like 1,100 of you for the last 48 hours. But I'm together with about 80 people, and they spent a whole a whole week of their life with us. And I got interested, and I looked at this, and I said, this here is your life. Every single dot of this chart is a week in your life. You only have, maybe granted we live a little longer, but you only have about 4,000 of those. And if you're anything like me, you're somewhere here. Right? So the question for me becomes, really the question I think we should ask ourselves is like, what do you do with this one precious dot? Because you don't have all that many of those. And how do you want to spend it? There's a beautiful bonus question, I think, and it's probably the most profound one I can. This is not mine. This is from a poem. And the question is, and did you get what you wanted from this life even so? And I think that's the question we should ask ourselves, not just at the end of our lives, but every day. Did we get what we wanted from this life even so? Admitting that it's hard and that we make the wrong choices all the time and that it's not easy. But did we get what we wanted from this life? I want to leave you with just 3 observations, personal observations. The one is, be gentle on yourself. One thing I find with these programs is that you're hopefully compelled to action, but I also find it takes some time to just digest and find what is true for yourself. The second one is, find what truly matters for you. And don't listen to the voices which say, oh, but you should care about. It's fine. It's fine for you to say, I don't care about this cause, I care about this. Find what truly matters for you. And the last one is, go and build what matters. Because we have the tools. We can become better versions of ourselves. We can become, and we will become gods. And the challenge is always, will we be good gods? Thank you so much.